Hey everybody, so we are here for another KEW exchange where knowledge through experience creates wisdom. And today we have Raquel Borras, whatever it is. I don't know. We're going to talk about good parent versus the guilt that we carry. Um, it's something I understand completely. Apparently Raquel is still posting because I see posting all over the place. I just get an notification.
last minute, like, hey, we're going live. I forget. I'm so sorry. I'm really bad at promoting myself sometimes. Sometimes I'm really good and sometimes I'm really bad.
I'm horrible at it. Horrible. Never want to promote myself. Yeah, I mean, I know you a little bit, so it's
just a little bit, and
just a little bit, right?
We've been on 3 lives together this week, I think. No, this is our 3rd. I don't know. And then Michael Ray, he just FaceTimed me, and I was like, dude, I'm about to go live. He's like, I've never met anyone to be on so many effing lives. So now I need like a hashtag or a thing. Cause like Nancy, she was getting the stream queen? I think Travis hashtagged her as a stream queen. I feel like I needed some kind of
rock the boat.
Moniker.
Rock the boat sounds like a good one. Seems to fit everything you do in your life.
Oh, look, and Katie J. Hey.
Look at that. Katie J took a lunch break.
Katie J, it's daytime, so we can't be typing up things.
That was something else last night. That was a trip. I didn't think I'd ever hear him say that, but that was okay.
I know that. Hey, you know what? Miracles do happen.
I'm telling you. Next thing you know, he'll be live with us one of these Thursdays.
Well, and we'll all be passed out. We won't be able to speak because we'll be like.
Will be odd.
Yes.
The queen of. So, good parenting, huh? It's
Well, I mean, it's interesting that this is the topic, and then you were just telling me before we got on, how Sid wasn't able to sleep last night, and it's one of those things where it's like sometimes you have the best intentions, right? And then it doesn't necessarily go the way that you want it to. And I think we then start feeling guilty and, my gosh, we suck as a parent, or gosh, I can't even do this right. There's a lot that we feed ourselves. And I've definitely experienced that, being that I went through a divorce. And I think any parent that goes through a divorce, that guilt, and then sometimes that guilt turns into maybe overindulging your children. Or, kind of caving in a little bit too much, all those things because of that guilt.
I mean, and that's kind of where I'm stuck, right? I mean, the abuse they went through, and then I felt bad that I had them in that situation. And so it's like I've been overcompensating, way too lax on them. And now that, because it's Arkansas and they're not used to ice on the roads, they barely can drive in the rain. It's like, they've been home now days in a row. So it's kind of like almost like a free for all at this point, right?
Yeah.
So it's, it's okay when it's the weekend, because then you get them back into the routine and you kind of give them a little bit of freedom, and, but then when it's days in a row, it's like, wow, this is really bad. It's even impacting me and my schedule completely. I'm way off my routine. I'm way out of it, and it's difficult. It really is challenging.
No, it's really hard. And then, to get back into that routine, it's like, then it's a whole nother process. And parent guilt, so overcompensation. Yeah. I mean, luckily my ex and I, were really amicable. And so when it came to Christmases and everything, holidays, we spend them together. So it's never been like Christmas here, Christmas there. So then the double gifting thing, we never believed in that. So if anything, from the start, we were really good about okay, what are we getting the kids? And it's from the both of us. So that was one thing that I'm really proud of ourselves that we did, is that they didn't get double anything. Birthday, same thing with birthdays. Hey, they want this, let's do it. Let's go in on it together. And it's from the both of us. And they learned really quickly with that. And then they learned really quickly too that they couldn't manipulate each of us in the sense that, because my kids were 9 and 6 at the time. And I remember I don't know if it was I think it was more my daughter would say something like, well, dad said, or she would say, go to my ex and be like, well, mom said, and we know each other so well that my ex would be like, really? Let me call your mom right now. Cause that, and I would do the same thing, like, oh, really? Your dad said that? And he said it was okay. I'm like, because that doesn't really sound like your dad. So I'm going to call him right now and ask. And they're like, maybe not. So right away, they realized too, they couldn't manipulate us, because my brother manipulated my parents like you would not believe. I mean, they didn't communicate, and man, he'd go to one parent, they'd say no, and then he'd go to the other one parent, they'd say yes, and then he's like, well, that parent said yes, and usually it was my mom that always said yes. So that's one thing. And then also we understand there's a whole good, bad parent, like where there's a dynamic where there's always that one parent that takes on kind of the bad cop, good cop. And so like we kind of established that from the start, that I would be a little bit of the good cop. And he'd play a little bit more of the bad cop, which was nice, because I already was the bad cop, because I'm the one that left the house and moved out. So that was a tough one.
Yeah, I mean, I manipulated my parents to no end, right? Because they didn't communicate very well. They stayed married until my mother died. So it was, I don't know what that sound was. Yes, it's okay. I don't hear screaming, so we're good. But like, I mean, I manipulated the crap out of them. Like, I mean, I just played them against each other at all times.
And kids are smart.
I'm telling you, like, I mean, I was a master at it, and I knew exactly how to word it so that one would say yes, even though I knew that the real answer was no. Mm-hmm. So then I flipping it around and going back and forth with them. And it really wasn't their fault, because after a while, I learned how to manipulate it, right?
Yeah.
And I learned how to play them. So, when me and my soon-to-be ex were together, granted, we had zero communication also, and that might be an understatement. I think we would text each other from the same couch.
You're like teenagers where you're like, dude, you're sitting right next to your friend and you got to text them. Oh my goodness.
It was torture. I mean, it was just doomed from the beginning, and we were both wrong for each other from the beginning. And I mean, it was just bad. But like, we had no communication, so our kids would try it all the time. Like Michelle Thomas would try it. Sid wasn't around yet, and it just became this cycle. And when I walked away from the environment in 2018, June 11th, 18, it was very challenging, right? Like, because I blamed myself for everything, and I overanalyzed, and I broke it down, and I was horrible. I was everything else, just making a mess of things. And at the end of the day, I'm not responsible for her choices or what she chose to do once I didn't walk out, right? Or walk away. Or, I mean, we had an agreement, but that didn't matter, obviously. It's, so how are you a good parent when I've always felt like I did the wrong thing, right? Yeah. Like, I couldn't stay in the environment anymore for my kids because I was losing myself. I lost myself completely. It was just a train wreck. And how could I leave that environment when there were so many unknowns with her? And lo and behold, 3 weeks later, she disappeared for 3.5 months with my kids. So it was just like this spiral. And then rather than rebuilding myself when I first got back to Florida, it was, where are my kids? Are they safe? I tried calling police stations, tried calling all these things to figure out even where they were. And it was really bad. Like, I mean, I went down. Like, I mean, I just destroyed myself over it. And over time, I started forgiving myself a little bit and started getting somewhere. And then it wasn't until I got my kids. I mean, I still blamed myself when I got them. Like, that first 2.5 months, I was in a massive depression. Like, it was horrible. And it was just, one of those things. Yes, losing yourself is a terrible thing. It's happened a few times because apparently, I'm stubborn, as I say almost every single stream. But it's I have to keep trying, right? Like, keep practicing the same thing until I get it. Yeah. But it's so complicated being a parent, and it's complicated when you're trying to be the best person for yourself also.
Yeah.
When you don't marry the right person, right? No matter what your intent is walking into it, at some point you know it's not the right person. And I don't know how long we decided to stick around after we knew, but I basically just settled because I wanted children, right? And I didn't expect her to lose her mind in the process, and maybe underestimated that side of it because there was red flags that I just ignored.
Yeah.
But it's really complicated because kids see through it anyway.
I was going to say, your kids at some point, they're going to understand like what the sacrifices you made and all of those things. And I, like, my kids are much older than yours. So my son's going to be 20, my daughter's 16, and they get it now because they know my ex, they know me, they see the dynamic. So they understand why we're not together. They totally do. And they also understand that I wasn't as bad of a person as maybe they thought I was. Not that they thought I was, but just to put it into context. So, you know, my ex and I was the one that wanted out of the marriage. I was the one that facilitated it. And I wasn't on the, you know, title deed or mortgage of the home. So technically it wasn't my home, but that's where my kids were, you know, brought up. That's where they lived. Like, that was their neighborhood. The school bus would come in front of the home. So I left the house, but you know, I didn't want my kids to do the whole back and forth thing. Like, that's something that I just didn't want. So I was going to have my kids in an apartment when they're in a really nice, you know, 3-story home in a beautiful neighborhood with all their friends. Like, why would I want to do that to my kids? So I had an agreement with my ex that they would stay there, and he worked from home, and he's a fantastic father, like such a wonder. I mean, I couldn't have asked for a better father for my kids, really. And so we agreed on it, but unfortunately, so many people saw it as, Raquel, I must have been a horrible person. I must have been doing something really bad that I didn't have my kids with me technically. And, you know, my ex and I were talking about this the other day. My ex had like admitted that he had to like defend me a lot of times because everyone's like, I don't get it. And he finally was like, she did what's best for our children. And I respect her for that. And I commend her for that. Like, and that's all I thought about. I was like, what's the best thing for my kids? I don't want the whole back and forth thing during the week. Like, not that I'm, you know, everybody has their own situation, but I just knew from my situation that just wasn't, I wanted my kids to be as stable and have as much consistency as possible. But that was really hard for me because I lost a lot of friends. I lost a lot of respect from people because they all thought, how can the mother leave the home? Even my mom said at one point, she's like, you're the mother, you belong in the house. And I was like, just because I'm the mother doesn't mean I belong in that house. Like, and I was a little harsh to my mom because I was like, Mom, you were a stay-at-home mom at home, but we never saw you. So, you know what I mean? But it's like the idea of the mom stays home, the mom has the kids, all of that. And it's like, I'm sorry, but there's plenty of shitty moms out there. I mean, there's plenty of and there's plenty of amazing dads too. It's like, it's not, you know what I mean? Like, it's not a one size fits all type situation. And so I had to like own up that our situation was very different, but it worked for us. To this day, I'm 10 years divorced. To this day, we still do everything as a family, everything, birthdays, holidays, even with his family, my family. And it works.
How does it work? How does it work when either of you might be in a relationship?
Well, I have to tell you that's something that
I'm just curious.
No, but that's the thing is like, I think because he hasn't been in one and I haven't either, and it's never been an issue. Granted, if there was another person, maybe it'd be completely different. I don't know, but it just hasn't gotten to that point yet. And I'm pretty upfront with people that I date. Like, I let them know right away, like, hey, I have a really good relationship with my ex-husband. Like, we still do everything together as a family. Like, that is more important to me than anything. So I'm vocal about it. And there's been some guys that are kind of like, not liking it so much. And I don't need someone like that in my life. I want someone that understands. So if anything, when I date someone who has a great relationship with their ex-wife, I love that. Like, I support that fully. So when they're like, hey, I'm going to my ex's, because I'm like, do it. Because if I can totally, respect what they're doing and be okay with it, then they're in turn going to do that same with me, because that to me is just really important. And I feel like my ex would do the same thing. I feel like anyone he would date he would be like, hey, by the way, like my ex, the mother of my children, they're very present in their lives. If anything, hey boo, I come over, like I would just walk in the door, and some people are like, seriously? I'm like, yeah, like if he knows I'm coming over and the kids call me up and like, come over, I'm like, hello. And then his dog loves me and the dog freaks out. And then, it's hilarious because there are times where I come over and he's like, the kids aren't home. I'm like, where are they? They're like, oh, Nicholas is with or whatever. And then he and I will just start like shooting the shit and just start talking and in the kitchen and just catching up. And then I was like, all right, see you later. Bye. Like, it's great, but it took a long time to get to that place too. Obviously, it wasn't like right away where we were that comfortable with everything. But I'm like, I don't have that much guilt as much anymore now that my kids are growing up in a way where I'm like, okay, I wasn't as bad as I thought I was.
Well, I mean,
you'll see that too with your children too.
But I think a lot of it is also what we project others think, right? Like that's a lot of it also is getting in our own head and projecting what they're going to think about us. Our guilt drives us to make us believe that they're thinking about that.
Yeah. Oh no, you should have heard some of the things. They all thought that I didn't want to be a mother, that I was going to go like party. And it was like, no, I just didn't want to be married. Like it had nothing to do with my role as a mother. Like I love being a mom. It's like, I absolutely love it. And I loved being a stay-at-home mom, all of those things. But it was really hard. And I've had a couple people just recently apologize. Like, hey, we're really sorry the way we acted. We're really sorry that we were so quick to judge. And they have come around and apologized, which is nice. And I appreciate that. Cause yeah, it was tough. Like, especially as a woman, like all the stay-at-home moms, like I thought they were like, we were really close. And then suddenly it's like, they all sided with my ex-husband,
Wow.
at first. And I was like, and even my kids, they even noticed that stuff. Hey mom, how come your friends are making us dinner and dad dinners, but they're not making you dinner? And I was like, yeah, good question. It's the reality. Like that's what happens, like Nancy can tell you the same thing. It was like, unfortunately you've got the people that kind of decide that they have to side with someone.
Well, me and my soon to be ex or whatever you want to call her, we didn't really have any mutual friends. She really went out of her way to destroy every single relationship I had. So it was very calculated, and probably the most intelligence she ever showed in our whole relationship was how to destroy my relationships with people. But other than that, like we were fortunate when it comes to that we just didn't have that environment and people to choose one side or the other. And the reality is lots of people did choose her side at first, and then over time it was like, yeah, she's nuts. And she stopped bringing me around her friends because even her friends would eventually pull me aside and be like, she's doing this, this, and this. And I'd be like, yeah, I know. And I'm here for my kids. What does that have to do with her?
Yeah. And that's the thing is, like you just said, I'm here for my kids. And that's something that I get really, it's heartbreaking for me when people do split up and there's divorces and the kids are put in the middle and the kids are being, used as pawns. And that's something that for me, it just like pains me because the kids are the ones that are, suffering. They're the ones that are going to be like, I mean, I could get on a whole freaking soapbox because I have friends that have gone through some nasty, nasty ass divorces. And man, I'm like, do you not see what you're doing to your children? Like, oh my goodness. Like I've too many people don't put their kids first. It's very strange. Yeah, it is very strange space. Like, yeah, like Nancy, like I was saying, Nancy's same thing. And it is a gut punch because you think like, oh, these are people. That's where it's interesting. Like a lot of the people that I thought that were going to be there to support, they all disappeared. And the people that I had some people surprise the hell out of me that they were the ones that were supporting me. They were the ones that were reaching out. I'm like, this is kind of weird. Like, it definitely shows you like people's true colors in that respect. But yeah, it's a tough one, but I feel like we need to talk about it more because it's like no parent there's that shame where you think like every parent wants to feel like they're the best parent and they're doing the best they can, right? So then when something happens that it shines a light on them in a way that's not like that, that's when they get all freaked out. But it's like, hey, there's going to be times as a parent we're not going to be in the best light. That's normal, and it doesn't make you a bad person, bad parent. It's just parenting is difficult. We have to show each other like some grace on that too. It's once again like we're so quick to judge each other as a parent, right? Like if someone stays up late, wow, I can't believe you let your child stay up after whatever. Oh, I can't believe you let your child eat that. Or what, you let him watch that show? It's like, listen, lady, or listen, guy, you know, my kids were very mature for their age. So my kids mature, like they were just very mature. My ex and I never coddled them. We just weren't those type of parents. So they tend to watch and be exposed to things that maybe some other people could look at and be like, whoa.
It's interesting. Well, look, I mean, I look back over the course of the last, let's say, 12, actually, since I've been sober, so 14 and a half years. And my life obviously is just never easy. It just hasn't been. I always struggled. I always fought. I always tried to go against my flow, and I always just tried to do what I thought was right. And at that time, I, was emotionally inept and didn't really have emotions, didn't really understand myself. So I made tons of bad decisions. Um, I don't regret marrying the wrong person because I am thankful for my kids into my
Oh
world.
yeah, like, oh my God.
But I definitely married the wrong person, and that just triggered this whole series of events where I had company with bad luck, where a partner ran off with money. AIG went belly up. That company imploded on me because I had a company that was based on financing international government projects. We were working with AIG as a backer. We were working with Swiss Re. We were working with Lloyd's of London to back the loans for the government. And I mean, like literally, when all that went down, everything disappeared overnight. The money dried up. Everything just disappeared, and it was just thing after thing. And before I ended up, before we were officially together, or right in the very beginning, I lost my driver's license in Florida for toll tickets, toll violations, because back then, right back then, if you violated a toll, they put 3 points on your license for each ticket. So I had 20 tickets, and they mailed them to my ex-girlfriend's address at the time, and she waited till day 31 to give it to me, and at day 31 it went into points and it went into fines. Before that, it would cost me $21. That day it cost me $3,900 and 60 points on my license. So I said, well, what am I going to pay $3,900 to still lose my license for this period of time? So I literally had to wait 7 years to get my license. And so I also, yeah, I felt trapped that way also in my marriage. It was very reverse. And then in 2012, my son got injured under her care. She either dropped him, he fell, whatever you want to call it, right? Like there's different theories behind that. And child services got involved, DCF, whatever you want to call them. And they started saying that if she was around the kids when I wasn't, they were going to take the kids. So then I became a stay-at-home dad, and she became the provider, which I then helped her build a multi-level marketing business, and she was doing really well with it until she found ways to mess it up on purpose, because we were just doing well. We went through house fires, we went through evictions, we went through repos, we went through everything. Like, I mean, it was hell. We lived in hotels after the house fire. I mean, like, we went through literal hell. We moved to New York. The place we moved into in New York had mold, and we lost everything we had. And like, I mean, like it was a sob story, like day after day, because our energy was fighting each other so bad. And I never felt like I could walk away from it, because if I walked away from it, I didn't have a driver's license. I wasn't able to really work because I had to be the one taking care of the kids. So I felt like I was the one that was behind the eight ball, right? Like it was a role reversal in our household. She didn't want to be responsible. I didn't have a choice but to be responsible for the kids. So it became this very strange dynamic between us. And because of her untreated mental issues, that compounded over time, and it just imploded. Like it just became this volcano of hell on a daily basis after a while. And when I disappeared into myself, it was truly just being there for the kids. Like, and once I got my license back and the dynamic started changing, that's when she really lost it. She couldn't handle the dynamic switching because her direct multi-level marketing business started failing because she wasn't putting the effort in. And at that point, I had to go get jobs. And then child services got involved again and said if they were around her for a minute without me, that they would have taken it. So I had to quit all my jobs and just wait. Yeah, Reggie, we don't hold back, do we? We're kind of at that. Look,
Yeah.
my life's been booked. I mean, I want to show others that they can do the same, right? I want them to be comfortable in their own skin.
Yeah.
You know, it's tough, right? Like nobody wants to sit here and listen to some of this shit, but it's tough. Like
Uh,
life is hard.
yeah, and it's but like just with you talking about it, and at some point when your kids get older, they'll appreciate that you really are trying your best for them, right? And that's why the whole, when you said I stayed in it for the kids, that's where I just have another issue with it too, where there's so many households that are just, the energy is horrendous because the parents can't stand each other, but one parent is sticking it out for the kids. That's what my dad did. And I knew I didn't want to repeat the cycle, because my ex and I did have a conversation about that. He was like, I'm okay with status quo. Like, at least you're here in the home. And I go, yeah, but I'm not okay with that. Like, we both deserve to be happy. We both deserve to, all of those things. And I was like, listen, I promised myself, seeing how I was, the household that I was raised in, I was like, I'm not ever doing that to my kids. And so that was something that I just was like, breaking the cycle, because I could have stayed. Right. But then, yeah, who's to say, like, yeah. And that's a unfortunate. And I get where, once again, I'm trying not to judge. I get where someone is like, I need to stick it out for the kids. And, I'm not in their situation. Just from experience, I couldn't do that, because I knew as a child, I knew what it was like to be in a home where the parents were constantly apart, where my dad was constantly talking to me like a therapist and telling me about like how he wasn't happy. And I just remember being like, dude, leave, like, what the heck? But I had a younger sister, and he finally did when she was in high school. But like, I just remember thinking, like, no kid wants to see their parent miserable either. Like, I didn't like seeing my parents miserable, or my dad miserable. I didn't like that at all. I would have rather had them apart and like fully happy. And I think a lot of people forget that your kids just want their parents to be happy. Like, you think they want them to be miserable? Like, because if you're miserable, you're most likely not being the best parent to your child if you're miserable.
What's funny is before the last set of sequences that brought us to Arkansas in the first place, my son looked at me one day and said, I don't want you guys to get a divorce, but I know you're not happy together.
Mm.
And he was 3, 4. Like, I mean, he just picked up, he just knew, right? Because it was misery.
Oh, they're so perceptive. Oh my gosh. That's another thing too. When people think their kids don't know what's going on, I'm like, please give your kid a little bit more credit here. you
They're,
know?
they're not, nothing surprises them. I mean, they see it all, whether we want them to or not. I mean, I saw it all with my parents, right? Like, I didn't want to believe it. I mean, it was, let's see, I was 40. So it was like right after I turned 40, my dad took me out to lunch and said, I'm sorry that I allowed your mother to abuse you the way that I did all those years.
Mm.
40 years old. And I'm like, okay. Yeah, thanks. I mean, I'm 40.
You're like, all right, well.
Right. Like, you always said I was lying about it. So at this point, it doesn't really matter anymore. Right. And he goes, but you're the only reason I stayed, because I wanted to protect you. And I looked at him and I said, you were never home. You were always at work.
Yeah, you're like, that's not
But,
protected.
there wasn't much protection. And my dad is emotionally void, always has been, not really in touch with his emotions at all until now, at 75, 76. I think they kicked in around 75. He had a little delayed response to emotions. Um, but it's, like I don't want to have those conversations with my kids. I don't want to sit down with them at 40 and say, I should have done this.
Yeah.
Like, it was bad enough I stayed around as long as I did, and that's why I have Sid. So I'm grateful. But at that point, it was time to go. I was just done.
Yeah.
Because the minute that the kids started sacrificing more by me being there, it was time for me to go.
Yeah. And you don't want your kids, just like how I didn't want to repeat the cycle. You don't want your kids, to repeat the cycle either. So someone just wrote like a really long.
I'm like trying to look at it, read that.
I'm here.
It is.
Break a giant legal battle against my employer, the bank. Okay.
Wow. Kelly, I don't know if that helps. Neither of us can see ourselves anymore.
Yeah.
It's like covered 3/4 of the screen.
Yeah. Apparently he has a short film. Okay. Well, I mean, I'll watch the short film if it's available.
Yeah.
But yeah, you want your kids to know what a healthy relationship is like and all of those things. And so that, like, even for my kids, and, so I have open dialogue with them, kind of like, not necessarily, I don't get like specific of why my ex and I aren't together, but I'm pretty open. And once again, like, they're at an age where they can kind of understand it because they themselves, are in that dating age. So they get it. And yeah, so I try to be open with them as much as I can so that they can learn from it. Because yeah, the last thing I want is for them to get married and divorced. Like, I don't want that for my kids either. But also at the same time, like, I also want them to understand that just because you're married doesn't mean that you're like in prison for the rest of your life if you're not happy. Is Sid awake?
Yep, Sid just woke up. Hi, Sid. Your butt itches? Okay. I'll make a note.
She needs to wipe better.
What? You're back too? I think you need to stop with the coconut cream. I think that's why you're itchy. You're looking at me like I'm crazy. Slept till 12:30. I'm not the crazy one. Do you want to take a bath?
I was gonna say maybe we should throw her in the bathtub.
You're like, no. Then sit down and play on your iPad. Sit somewhere, anywhere. Sit on the floor. I'm live right now, just in case you were wondering. You're cold out here?
Yeah.
Well, it's 15 degrees out, so that would make sense why you're cold. You're walking around in a diaper. But look, I mean, again, right? We can just parent the best that we can, so nothing's perfect. And we just got to do. Sid, you're getting way too big. Like, this is ridiculous. I'll knock everything over. Here you go. You want me to zipper it, don't you? Yeah, of course it won't zipper. Your OCD won't let me know. It's tough though, right? Like, I mean, sometimes you got to let them just be a little too, right?
I know. But I was telling you this the other day, is that, you truly, genuinely are doing the best you can. And we see that, right? Like, even though I have never met you in person or any of that, but just like through our conversations, through our lives, just the way you interact with your kids. I mean, I've already had a conversation with Michelle. And so, I was saying that because of that, like, I'm not going to sit here in any way have any right to judge or say anything, right? And I was just saying that you're really blessed too, that you have a community of people that get that, because people can be super, super critical.
Super good. Right.
And let's be honest, what you're sharing and the things that your kids have gone through and what you've gone through, there could be plenty of people that have something to say about it, right?
I'm sure. And the good news is I learned to ignore everybody.
And but that's great, because once again, you are doing the best that you can. And we know that. So why are we going to sit here and say, because I don't know how I would have, in your situation, I can't sit here and be like, oh, I would do this differently, or I would have done that. Like, I cannot.
You don't want to be stranded in Arkansas for a year? I think you would love it.
Sorry.
I think you would love it out here.
All you Arkansasians.
I have no idea what it is.
Yeah.
I mean, you have to drive 2 hours each way to go to Whole Foods. You'd be in trouble.
I know, since I'm such a, grocery snob.
Well, either that or Walmart. Like, I mean, there's no option, so.
But yeah, that's Nancy. She's like, I've seen you parent and it's beautiful. You're exactly the right papa of those babies. Exactly.
See.
She's right with that.
Well, she's a better judge than I am, so we're good.
It's always those outside looking in, right?
Well, yeah, it is. I mean, we never see it in ourselves, right? Like, I mean, when you first left, you didn't see it in yourself that you were doing, you know, maybe you did in some capacity, but you
My
probably,
lawyer did tell me, he's like, wow, you're like one of the nicest clients I've ever met. And I go, well, what do you mean? And he goes, because moms, they want those kids. And I'm like, really? And I was like, kind of like naive in a good way, where he was even himself. He was like, well, I hope this works for you. Cause it was a very open-ended type thing where, and 10 years later, it's working, but it's because I just had to follow my heart and do what I knew was right for our kids. And once again, I'm really blessed that I had an ex that understood that and respects me for that and defends me to people about it all the time, because yeah, it sucks when, you know.
that's huge though, right? Like, I can promise you there's not a single good word that comes out of my ex's mouth about me in any way, shape, or form. Not even the fact that I'm breathing, but
Well,
like
maybe one day down the road she'll see, and maybe, you never know. Hey, once again, miracles can happen. You know, might be on your deathbed, not to sound morbid, but it might be, you know, you see that too, where it's not until like someone's ready to pass on where they realize like, oh shit, you know what? Like, I need to acknowledge the fact that this person did the best that they can, and they actually, you know, raised our kids, because that's what you're doing.
well, I mean, and at the same token, I mean, I've already forgiven her because it's outside of her control, right? Like, she has mental illness that she's just avoiding and ignoring.
Yeah.
She's not getting addressed. She's
Yeah, and
just
then
not.
that's the thing too with your kids, right? Like, you don't want to badmouth their mother, because there is going to be a point where they're going to want to understand like what happened. And, you know, it's like you also have to let them have their opinion and have, you know, feel, because, you know, a lot of parents try to make the other person out to seem like the horrible person, and they might be, but at the same time, it's like you also have to let your children be the ones to decide how they view their parent. I mean, that was just like me too. Like, I thought my mom was the bad guy for a really long time, because
Yeah.
that's kind of what I was told and made out, you know. And that was the same thing with me. I was like, ooh, I hope I'm not being made out to be the bad guy. And I wasn't, luckily. And then now my kids are seeing that I wasn't. Just same thing with my mom. Like, it takes two to tango. And I'm not, you know, like, I'm sure you're the first to admit too that there's some things that like could have been done differently and within the relationship. And
Yeah, I mean, there were many
you
things.
all have to be held accountable for something.
There were many things. I mean, the only option would have been for us to walk away from each other at any point earlier, right?
And that's maybe something that you have to hold yourself accountable, like that you didn't walk away sooner, right?
Well, and I wouldn't have had Sid because Sid was born right at the end, right?
Okay.
She was a year when I left, so like I look back and I'm not ashamed of any of it at this point.
And
You
you
know,
I mean,
it's shitty. I mean, I didn't like it unplayed. Oh, Nancy, I love you.
somehow we're conditioned that we must honor the commitment we made as our younger self, even as we grow and evolve at all costs, which means we are left with nothing but failure if we choose to honor ourselves and make difficult choices that are hard for us as individuals, and others stand apart and judge. Yeah, it's true.
It's 100% true. And again, I mean, it comes down to society stigmas, right? Which we've talked about many different kinds of them by now.
Yeah.
But it's, you know, if you're not happy, find a way to be happy, right? Like, make it work for the kids, make it work for whoever. You want to hug me? Okay.
Aww.
But make sure that you're making it work so in a way that you can be your best self.
Yeah.
Because you don't want to sit by and teach your kids that it's okay to settle and be miserable either.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And that's one thing that I did learn from my parents. Yes, sir. You want what? You want to sleep? You just got up. Okay, go back to sleep. You know, hey Marcello, unfortunately I did learn that from my parents, right? You don't stay to sacrifice yourself, both be miserable, and not expect that to have repercussions either.
But I think we're a generation of that. Like, we definitely are, like, I think we're a big generation of the parents sticking it out for the kids, Now, obviously, divorce is at a higher rate, so it's a little bit, you know, different. But yeah, I do feel that most of us can say that a lot of our parents stuck it out because society and because it was a marriage contract and all of those things, and you committed and you said till death do us part, through sickness and health, all those things. But I will tell you this, like, it doesn't mean that you still can't have that. Like my ex and I, we're till death do us part through sickness and in health, actually, in the sense that
Want to sit up?
we've been there for each other in the moments where, you know, in the moment. And so, but we don't have to be married in order to honor that either. You know, God forbid something happened to him and I'd be there by his bedside.
Okay. Oh, timing's everything.
I know, of course.
I think there's this gray area, right, where we have to balance everything.
Mm-hmm.
And we have to figure out a way that these are difficult conversations between two adults, right, that are married, if they have children, assets, whatever it is.
So horribly difficult.
And it's,
oh my gosh.
There's got to be a way to make it more comfortable and more normal. Because the most popular job in the world, as soon as COVID finally is gone, is going to be a divorce lawyer. Right?
Did you see the meme? There was like memes in the beginning of like divorce lawyers, like literally in bushes waiting for COVID to because all these divorces. But I've seen the opposite. I will tell you this. I have seen some couples where friends of mine were kind of like complaining about their spouse before COVID. And then now they're like in a really good place with their spouse because it kind of also forced them to be together and to talk about it and be like, all right, maybe we need to reevaluate what our marriage looks like or what this looks like. And they're actually doing really well. So it's gone both ways. Unfortunately, I feel like it's a little bit more on the divorce side than the other, but it's nice to know that there's also been ones that have made it work.
I mean, we're also in a culture where you know, it's said you have to be married by a certain age, you have to have kids by a certain age, you have to do this by a certain age, you have to have a house, you have to have this, you know, and until those expectations aren't there anymore,
yeah,
people aren't going to be jumping into things to fit others' expectations, rather than be themselves and just go at their own pace.
Hi, you. And yeah, like she also said, it really gets me when people think that people choose divorce as a cop out or an easy exit. And yeah, like it is not easy. Like, oh my gosh, like it is a lot easier, I think, to stay in it sometimes and just kind of suck it up and do all of that. You know, and so for people to say it's a cop out or like, oh, you're not trying hard enough, or because I've had conversations with people, because being that I am divorced, I do have plenty of people approach me and like, hey, how did it work? And then they'll explain to me their situation. And I have an opinion sometimes. I'll be like, hey, listen, I think you're wanting a divorce for the wrong reasons. Like, cause some of it, a lot of people tend to think the grass is greener on the other side. And I'm always quick to be like, the grass isn't necessarily greener. So if that's a reason, then I don't know, you might end up like even more miserable, because I've had friends too that end up regretting it. I mean, I have friends that have gone back to their ex-spouses.
Well, that will never be my case. But what I think is COVID, right? Like we talked about this last night, how it's kind of locked us into a position to where we are forced to look at ourselves and be with ourselves.
Yeah.
When we're doing that, and we can't really blame anyone else anymore.
Yeah.
It's kind of one of those things where it makes us so uncomfortable that if the grass is different, it's one of those that if you're with a partner in this circumstance, it doesn't mean it's going to be better also, right?
Right.
Like boyfriend, girlfriend, relationship, fiancés, whatever it is, like your whole dynamic of your life changed, right? And you went from both of you being out of the house so many hours a day, or both of you not being around each other, to now you're on top of each other. So all the things that you thought that might have been great about each other is probably not anymore. You really don't know who you're in with, right? Like, you even talked about it, I think, last week about the affairs that have been coming to end, or the ones that are
I got
starting.
last night where that's something I've thought about because, a lot of people did rely on the travel and relied on their jobs to be able to have like a dual life, to be able to, do different things and meet other people and maybe, have some fun with other folks because they weren't having fun with their spouses and they don't have that anymore. So I was just curious of like how they're dealing with this. Are they going to like look at their situation and be like, all right, you know what? Like, let's really delve into why I was doing that, or maybe now I should focus a little bit more on my spouse since I'm here and see if maybe it'll work, and so that's like where I come from with that. It wasn't so much of like, ooh, drama, people are going to find out about people's affairs. It was more of like a reflection of
I think that's probably 90% of the travelers that are still going to airports. Like those are the people that are still taking that chance, because COVID doesn't seem as scary as staying home.
yeah.
But and then COVID, how scary is it really based on your actions and how you live your life, right? Like you've been very open and honest that you don't leave the house, right? So
Yeah.
so you're being very genuine to yourself when you say that. But then there's other people that find ways to compromise their values just because they want to fill something, right? They want to go somewhere, do something. And it's challenging because, where do we live our life? Where do we live in fear? And where do we live safely? And leaving divorce, leaving marriages, walking away, making my move back to Florida to try and rebuild myself. Then the kids disappear. Like all these different complicated parts and pieces. There was a chain reaction that got started by that first move, right? And I don't know where I'd be right now if I didn't walk away, because I was miserable. I was truly miserable in that relationship. Like I wanted to be dead. And we've talked about it ad nauseum that I can't die. So it was really tough. Like I really wanted to be, right? Like, I mean, I tried. It just wouldn't work, right? Like, I mean, at one point I went up to 350 pounds. At one point I wanted to see how high my blood pressure could get. It hit 270 over 197 or 203, and I'm still here standing. The doctor looked at me and said, do you have any symptoms? And I said, of what? Like, what are you talking about? I feel great. I mean, it's like there was a day that my blood pressure was like 250 over 180 something, and my sugar was over 500. And the doctor looked at me and said, "You're going to the hospital." I said, "Why? Like, why? What's wrong?" and the doctor's like, "You're gonna die." And I said, "Don't worry about it. I'm not. But what's wrong? Like, I'll be fine. But what's going on?"
Yeah.
And I went into the hospital overnight, and it was fine. Like nothing ever happened. But it's like I wanted to be dead. It was so miserable in that relationship, and it was that horrible.
Yeah, and you don't deserve to be that horrible because of a relationship. Like, come on, like, I mean, for me, and this is something that, one part of guilt and kind of feeling like a shitty parent was, towards the end, like I couldn't stand being around my ex. Like I was getting so much anxiety that I was just like, any excuse not to be home, I wouldn't be home. Whether I was just going to Target or going to the grocery store or just going to like, and unfortunately, my kids viewed it as mom's never wants to be around us or never wants to be home. And that was really hard. But I just like, I mean, the level of like anxiety and stress that I was experiencing, I just, and looking back, yeah, I do regret that. But in that moment, it's just like the only way I knew how to handle it. And even, I used to teach yoga and cycle, and I used to teach up to 12 classes a week. Okay. Like hardcore cycle, hardcore, like power yoga. And I still managed to gain like 20 pounds. Everyone talks about the divorce diet. I was the opposite because I drank a bottle of like Riesling, which is the sugars, like the most sugary, wine you can have. And I always, I ate my feelings. I still eat my feelings. I'm not as bad. But so I would eat donuts and cupcakes and wine and all this stuff. And I managed to gain 20 pounds, even though I exercised like crazy. It just goes to show you how stress and cortisol, like it is a real thing. But yeah, those were all kind of the things that I was doing at the time too. And like I said, hindsight, probably, would have changed some things, but
I mean, how
yeah,
long do you
coulda, woulda.
I mean, how long do you think you stayed? When was your first, like, you
It
know,
it took at least a good year, almost 2 years, I think, until I finally was able to like cut the cord and do it. Because that was all that guilt. And I'm like, because I kept thinking I'm going to F up my kids if I leave. All my kids, and my kids are good kids. They get good, you know what I mean? Like, if anything, I think because of the way my ex and I have dealt with the divorce and still do everything as a family, and I really put them first, and they know that, then it's been okay. But yeah, it was a struggle there at the house for a good time there. And I'm not proud of it. It's interesting. The other day we were having a conversation with my daughter, and she was like trying to remember because she was 6. And it's interesting what she remembers and how she viewed, and like she's like, "Oh, you guys had gotten into a huge fight, and then Dad just left, and Mom didn't know, And we were asking, where did Dad go, and you didn't like." So the things that she remembers, like, it's interesting for us to have the conversation, and it's hard. Let me tell you, like, it's hard for us to have, for me to hear those things and to have it. But I'm so glad that we're able to have that conversation and be open about it. Like, not many families are open about the divorce process and what the kids experienced and what their perception was. And so to get my kids' perception on it, it's pretty incredible. It is, heartbreaking at times. Because they remember exactly the day that we told them. And, my son wanted to burn the house down with me in it. He was like, "You're not my mom anymore." And he was 9. He was so angry, locked himself in his room. It was awful. It was absolutely awful. But it's also healthy to be able to talk about it years later.
it is, and having the transparency, I think is good, right? Like when I was going back to Florida, I told my kids before I told her, because the reason I booked the ticket is because she disappeared again. My kids wanted to do something for my birthday, and she wasn't around. And she promised the kids she'd be there. Um, so it was very strange, right? And the whole thing was awkward. And she ended up being out with that boyfriend for 3 days in a row, was home for maybe 5 or 6 hours a day in between. It was really strange. And she kept promising my kids that we would do something for my birthday, and there was nothing happening. So what I did was I took the kids aside, and I sat down with them and I said, "Look, I'm leaving. Um, I'm gonna leave, but I'm gonna come back for you. But I have to go get some stuff straightened out because I can't do anything here, right? Like at that point, I was in Arkansas for 13 months, and there was nothing here, and it was even a smaller town than where I am now. And it was the opposite end of Arkansas. There was just nothing for me. Like I applied for jobs, I would talk to the regional manager, district manager. I would talk to the regional state manager, and they'd be like, "You're way too overqualified. You're gonna take my job."
Yeah.
I don't want your dumb job. I just need to get paid. Like,
Yeah, I just want a paycheck.
right. Like, I mean, and there was nothing, right? Like in these small towns, you're a doctor or a lawyer, a pharmacist, and that's about it. That's like all these towns really have for any decent income. And I'm learning that in rural America because now I'm stuck here or been stuck here. And it's like that's it. If you're not one of those 3 things, there's really no upside here. You're a blue collar worker. I'm not a mechanic. I'm not mechanical. I'm mechanically declining. I always hate.
Handyman, Michael.
Yeah, no, 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 not Mr. Handyman. Like I barely know what tools are. It's just not my thing. Now, granted, I've learned and I can do stuff, and I've been doing more. Still can't figure out how to clean a fan that's 8 feet off the ground, though. But that's besides the point.
They have little, the dust thingies. They have retractable ones. Believe me, my OCD and the fact that I was like such a clean freak.
Hmm?
You can do that. The Swifters.
Ride your scooter? Go ahead, ride your scooter. Why not? Nobody's home. Go ahead and ride your scooter. Can I finish the live though? Because that's kind of important.
I've got my iPad.
You're not going to have your iPad and ride the scooter. Something tells me that's dangerous. Okay, here. Go for it. We'll see what happens.
I was gonna say, let's see if she can do it. And they're gonna hear this boom.
I'll immediately say, and
I'll be like, all
never
right.
well, Nancy signed off, and she's a court reporter, or she's a court mandated reporter, so we're good.
I so, by the way.
Oh, are you? Oh shit.
I
Well,
volunteer. I volunteer for the Loud and Abused Women's Shelter, and I'm technically a state mandated.
I'll have to throw you off real quick. But you know, look, it's just, you know, sometimes you've got to make those choices, and you've got to make a decision that makes you feel really shitty, like really shitty, to work out in the long run, right?
Yeah.
And you've got to work towards you, right? And I think that's part
shitty, and too many people don't want to have that feeling of feeling shitty, so then they go ahead and do it, you know, and it's like, no, you know what? It's important to feel shitty. Really,
it is. It is, and it's Sid, go ride your scooter. And it really is important, right? And it's what? Here, we'll put it right here. You can watch it as you drive by. How's that sound? So this scooter is from their grandmother, my mother-in-law, and it has Minnie Mouse's sound every time it moves.
Oh. But you know what? This reminded me, you know how like back in the day when we were younger, they had the videos, you know, the home videos. This is like the wave of the future. So all your lives, like years from now, you can play your lives and be like, look, kids.
Yeah, right. Look at what you guys did. I don't know if you ever saw this, but if you go to Annie's YouTube and you look at the first live she ever did, the first one, it's called the Paterano Zoo. Because about 7 minutes into our live, my kids took over.
Oh my God.
It was insane.
And now you have it documented for the rest of your life, and they'll appreciate it when they get older and like, look at me as a kid, and look at me, you know, with the scooter and all of this thing. Yeah.
Well, there's a delay on YouTube if you put you. Okay, I'm on live. Okay, I'm watching. Good job.
No, not this.
Okay, watch this. Okay. Why do kids always do this? Watch this. Watch this. Didn't hit some. Anyway.
You're busy, right? It's like, you know, the kids are playing by themselves on the phone, and then they want your attention. It's like classic.
I'm watching. You hear this? This is like.
Is that the Minnie Mouse or is that her?
That's her.
Oh my God.
Sid, what's wrong? I'm watching you.
Sid.
Oh, well, she's taking the diaper off now. This should get fun.
Well, we're almost at an hour anyway.
Yeah.
You
So I don't even know what I was saying, but because there's a delay on YouTube when you put the YouTube channel on the TV. So they would run from the back room, jump in front of the camera, and then run to the back room to see themselves on TV.
Oh, is that what they would do? Oh my gosh. Okay, now I'm gonna have to go check that out. Sid.
Hi. Sid, say hi. Maybe we can get Raquel to dance with the trolls for you again. No? Oh, your back itches? You probably shouldn't bake.
Yeah,
Wait, boogers on my sweatshirt.
you go tend to Sid.
Stay around, say hi. Come on, say hi. Yeah, child.
It's all good.
Look how thick her hair is. That used to be like mine. Can you
She's
imagine?
got some really thick hair.
It used to be like mine. Can you imagine it?
Wow.
Hopefully she doesn't end up with mine. You want a haircut like Daddy's? Now what are you pouting about? This is guilting kids, right? This is what it is.
Yeah, well,
So-
this is, you know, hey.
It is. It's life, and
life.
how none of them came out last night shocked the crap out of me, right? I mean, we were on for 2 hours, so
We were for a while.
yeah, that was kind of shocking that none of them made an appearance.
Yeah.
Oh, Tom wants to ask me for money. That's right, for the
Who wants
Roblox.
to ask you? Oh, Thomas.
Yeah, for Roblox.
Okay, we'll have to see if maybe this weekend he'll want to get on.
That's what I'm trying to do.
Well,
Trying to get into it. You know what? That's how I'll buy them Roblox. That's it. It's the only way he's getting them.
oh
Look
man,
at that.
don't want you to bribe your kids to have to talk to me. That's not the point. The point is
Thomas get a bribe just to talk. Michelle will get on with you every day if you want.
Michelle, yeah. Well, she's just reading.
She's easy. She's just easy. She's so happy.
She's just a ball of joy and love and
Thomas has just been through hell and it shows.
Yeah, but you know what? Like, once again, you're there for them. You're doing what you can, and you know they'll be okay.
Yeah, they're getting there. Little by little, they're getting better. Yeah. Even Helmet. Her hair is growing in good after shaving her head for the second time since I've had her.
Well, I told you my mom shaved my hair because of the wives' tale that it comes back thicker, and I have like really thick hair. And my brother, they shaved his hair, and his hair is thick. And my sister, they didn't do it, and she doesn't have thick hair. And she's always like so pissed off. She's like, "Why didn't you guys shave my head?"
You should try it now.
My dad wasn't into it. Like I think with me, I think I found out later that my mom just did it and didn't even ask my dad. And then with my sister, I think my dad was like, "Yeah, no." So she's got in here, huh?
What age were you when they did that?
Before I was 1.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I wasn't walking. Both of us, both my brother and I, it was like we were still pretty much babies. And I also got my ears pierced when I was in the hospital, I think. So another thing where in the Mexican culture, you get the girls get their ears pierced like right away.
Wow.
Yeah.
Bless you.
So.
Bless you.
Oh my gosh. All right, we'll go 10 to 6.
Right. Oh, here we go.
I've had so much coffee that I need to pee.
You don't want to make lunch? You don't want to make lunch while you're on live? I mean, maybe the whole world.
Well, I mean, I actually have a little bit of a break because I'm recording a Rock the Boat episode at 4. So
you got a couple hours for yourself.
Yeah, so I think I'm going to try to eat beforehand this time around. Yeah. But yeah, I have so this is kind of cool. Felicia's daughter, Ariel, it's Ariel's teacher's daughter.
Mm.
So it's the teacher that saw it and she was like, "Hey, I would love to have my daughter." And the daughter is a little astronomer.
Oh, that's awesome.
Astronomy. So I'm really excited to talk about astronomy because I myself am a closet, astronomy geek and I love all that stuff. So yeah, so we'll see. And I think she might be in 2nd grade. I think she's in 2nd grade. So yeah, and she likes to do art too. So yeah, I'm looking forward to, and I already just, popped on the one from last night with Natasha, which looks like I'm going to be binging Marvel movies this weekend to try to get a better grip on WandaVision and the Avengers characters.
You have a lot to catch up on.
Yes, but you know what? I'm loving it because speaking of parenting and all that stuff, like it's really important to be able to connect and relate to kids and your own kids. And that's what I'm doing. And so that's how this whole conversation came about, where I wanted to talk about this topic, is that by doing this, I've really had to reflect on how I've been showing up as a parent myself. Because if I'm getting all this time and attention towards the other kids, giving them permission to speak about anything, really paying attention to what they're telling me, I got to do the same for my children.
Yeah.
So it's been helping me a lot to better myself. And they're 19, almost 20 and 16. It doesn't stop, right? You can always get better. You can always improve. Even in their 30s, I can still improve. Shoot, I still want my parents to improve. I'm 45 years old and I'm kind of like, shit, if I'm like trying to be a better parent, like you guys should try to be a better parent. I don't care if you're in your 70s. Like there's still work to be done here, folks.
I don't know if that's how it works, but
I just feel like it should never end, that you should always be trying to do better and learn from it. All of that. I think that it never should stop when you're a parent. I don't care how old your kids are.
I think that generation didn't live that way.
I know. So I have to kind of like them great.
They were entrenched in their path, right? Whatever their path was is where they went. There was no other path.
Yeah. Yeah, so at times, my siblings and I we do get a little frustrated with our parents because we're like, dude, we're trying to be better. We're trying to change, like, hello, but they're so set in their ways. Yeah, that generation's very set in their ways.
100%. I need coffee.
I was like, you need a nap.
Well, a little late now, so I missed that window.
All right.
But yeah. All right. I'll talk to you later, Raquel. Thank you so much for joining us. Oh, what's your website? Your YouTube?
Oh, I finally have a custom domain. So it's YouTube/C/Rock the Boat. RAQ the boat. I finally got a custom URL.
Awesome.
How cool is that? I made it.
That's awesome. Oh, thank you everybody for watching, and I appreciate you.
Everyone that's still hanging out.
Yeah.